Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again. Another week has sped past and I'm back here with my partner in crime, Mr. Dickson. Lovely to see you again, Steve.
Thanks, Chris. Lovely to be here. Here we go again.
Yep. How's things? Have you had a good week?
Good game, good game.
Well, yes, very indeed. Nice. Very nice, mate. Well, listen, look, I don't want us to sound like who were those two old boys that used to be in the Muppets? Statler and Waldorf, wasn't it?
I think Muppet Show was a bit before my time, Chris.
Well, I'm sure they showed it to you during history lessons or something, you young pup. But there was
possibly I missed that lesson. Yeah, Jim Henson, wasn't it? Jim Henson. There
was two old boys that used to sit up on the balcony and they'd all go, oh, it's terrible, things aren't good, and all this sort of stuff. And I think we've got no choice because now again, pulling Portugal off of the green list, what an absolute pain in the butt that Mr. Shaps is.
Statler and Waldorf. Those are the fellas.
Yeah. Oh, you do remember, or you looked it up. Yeah, well done.
Look it up. What have I got to look up?
Yeah.
No, the earpiece. The producer gave me a whisper in my ear.
Oh, well done, Simon.
Yeah. No, look. I guess. Before we touch on the green list, Chris, I was at risk of falling into that trap the other day. I came back from a trip and arrived into Heathrow and jumped on the Heathrow Express, which is not very express these days. It's only every 30 minutes. And rather than take the tube, I decided that I'd have the luxury of a black cab.
Yeah.
So of course, in the black cab from Paddington, it's about 20 minutes to my house. And during that time, the cab driver and I had clearly put the world to rights.
Like you do.
And there's no person better than a black cab driver to engage in a little bit of banter with, or sort of gentle kind of let's say whinging about society or its problems or the systems or TFL or Mayor Kant, etc., with whom we had a great sort of 20-minute drive. Anyway, I said to him when he dropped me off outside my front door, I said, oh, look, sorry, mate. Sorry if I was having a bit of whinge. He said, no, it's positively refreshing having a conversation with someone. So one person's whinge is another's. So look, however, I will have a whinge about Grant Shapps, but I think it is absolutely warranted. We have said since last year, Chris, that one of the challenges with the system that they had in place last year with the sort of the green to red. I don't think it was an amber at that time. Some of our listeners might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was either you're good to go or you're not. Yeah. And that meant that there was no quarantine or there was, or travel was permitted or it wasn't. It was a very simple system. The problem was that you went from kind of green, good to go to red, almost overnight, giving people no warnings. So those that had made bookings in the future had no warning. The airlines and the airports themselves had no warnings. Those that had booked trips and were currently overseas when they left in good faith to a green zone were now having to return from a red zone. And the government had committed that following the lessons learned from last year, that they would work with industry to ensure that would never happen again. And what do we see? Only 3 weeks ago, 21 days ago to the day yesterday, Portugal was awarded green zone status, to the merriment and delight of many, including those in the Portuguese government. Because if you remember last year, there was a bit of jostling for position. All of these countries wanted to be on the green list. This was a good place for them to be.
Yeah.
And Portugal had missed out a couple of times last year, and they were the first. They were not the first country green list this time, but they were the first meaningful, a country of meaningful sort of size and scale for British tourism. And the Brits are the number one tourists in Portugal, and the Portuguese rely on the British pound, and they rely on the British tourists to visit as often as we do. And so it was met with astonishment yesterday. Astonishment. Although quite why I'm astonished at any of the government's actions now after 15 months, I don't know. And even more so, Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary. But really, this just goes to show, Chris, the government have not listened. They have not engaged with industry. They have not worked with or taken the lessons from last year, or adopted some of the requirements or the inputs from the global travel task force that the Prime Minister himself established with industry, with people that kind of know a little bit more. With all due respect, ministers, they can go from portfolio to portfolio. They're not there to be experts within their portfolio. They're there to lead a department of civil servants that are experts in their portfolio. So I don't hold it against the ministers, but it seems that transport always gets the rough end of the stick and always gets the down and outs. And those that are lacking a little bit of cerebral power generally end up with transport. And I find that astonishing. You wouldn't put a moron into running the Treasury. And generally treasurers, those running the Treasury, chancellors, have always been kind of let's say the creme de la creme. From the days that I remember of, Geoffrey Howe and Norman Lamont and Ken Clarke, through to more recent times of Gordon Brown.
You didn't remember the Muppets.
Think what you like about their policies, but in terms of their intellectual capacity and their brain power, they're stalwarts. Look at what we get in transport. We get clowns like Chris Grayling and now Grant Shapps that wouldn't know an airplane head on if it met them between the four eyes. And in fact, I remember in a call that I was on with the aviation minister himself a few months ago, he said, oh, it's amazing that I must be the only aviation minister ever that's never been on an airplane.
Yeah.
So, Chris, am I surprised? No. Am I disappointed? Yes. Am I angry? Yes. I think I'm not the only one. I know you are as well, and many others will be. This just goes to show, and even with the sentiment from the Portuguese government,
they made sense, Steve. I was listening to that. I listened to the tourism minister and the prime minister this morning, and they are shocked by this news, and they were given no pre-warning either, no heads up. So what happened to bilateral relations and engagement? What is the embassy in Lisbon doing? What is the British embassy doing in Lisbon, engaging with their counterparts in the Foreign Office? Clearly nothing. They are absolutely inept of any bit of grey matter or cerebral power, whatever. It is beggars belief. Yet, mind you, the country that I live in, Malaysia, who've got more cases, rising cases, more variants, more deaths, more everything, still sits on the amber list. Yeah.
It should have been moved to red. So you've moved Afghanistan. I wasn't fancying a holiday with the Taliban, quite frankly, anyway. But you've moved Afghanistan and Egypt that have got lower COVID load in the community than my home country, Malaysia.
Yep.
And yet Malaysia remains an amber. Why? Because there's good, strong bilateral relations with Malaysia and the UK, unlike there is maybe with Afghanistan and Egypt or others. So it just goes to show, and Qatar's still on that red list, United Arab Emirates, there is no science and no evidence now being used whatever. It is all politicking, quite frankly.
That's what's making it bad. But the thing that you covered there, and the thing that really annoyed me is no notice or no indication with Portugal. How can you do that and then knock it off so quickly? There should have been a little bit of a warning or whatever. And if it's because they're saying that this new variant of concern has got a high number in Portugal and that's why they did it, then it needs to be backed up by more data, because the minister from Portugal was saying, contrary to what was being used as the reasons from the UK. And it's just a terrible thing, Steve. I don't understand it at all. And at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to get used to living with the fact that there's going to be non-stop new variants, and it's going to be part and parcel of living with the aftermath of this. I
really don't know what the point of a vaccine is if we can't go anywhere without it, even with it. It beggars belief. Now that 75% of this country has one vaccine, and over 50% has now fully vaccinated. So the whole argument about lockdowns and not travelling was to protect the NHS. In London yesterday, there are 120 beds occupied for COVID patients. 120. Yeah. Meantime, there's a 5 million waiting list on the NHS across the country for operations that were deferred during COVID.
Yeah.
So that now is, they cannot use that as a factor for delaying and the lockdown or delaying the restrictions that are still in place. The second thing is we were told to protect the vulnerable. The vulnerable are now protected. A wonderful statistic I read from Public Health England and the ONS was of the 75 to 80 age group, 100% of them are fully vaccinated. Over that age, it drops down to about 98%, 97%. Yeah. But all of those in the vulnerable categories are now fully vaccinated. They cannot use that as a factor for delaying lockdown or not allowing us to travel. The third thing is that the other communities in which we are traveling to often have better controls in place with better discipline, with mask wearing or restrictions, or I wouldn't say on the vaccine race because no,
that's right. Yeah.
Right. But so all of those things together, Chris, if they now try to tell us that the 21st of June will have to be delayed and we're going to not reopen till July, we will lose another summer. Our travel industry will be decimated. All of the work that the airlines, the airports, the ground handlers, people like you and me are working with all of these individuals and businesses to get ourselves ready for this restart that has already happened in Europe. I've traveled a lot in the last few weeks, and I've seen that in Spain last week, Chris, the airport was full coming home, full. It was wonderful to see. It really was wonderful. The Swiss are traveling, the French are traveling, the Germans are traveling, the Italians are traveling. The dear old Irish, with an Irish passport, you can travel. It's wonderful that this has been allowed to happen. And look, hats off. I mean, I'm not much of a Europhile, much more of a Sinophile, as you know.
Yep.
But the European Union has allowed their citizens to travel. Why? Because they're making inroads. If we take this to coin a phrase from the national poet of Scotland, Robert Burns, he said to a mouse, a wee timorine currid beastie. That means a wee timid, shy, small, timid, shy, cowering little animal. Somebody a little shy in the head. Somebody that'll move away. We can't be like that in our lives, surely. We can't operate like that. We've got to get bloody on with it. Unlock the shackles, open the doors, and let us travel.
Hey, Robbie Burns. Hey, well done, you son. That was beautiful. And thanks for the translation. I would have been absolutely lost without that.
No, to some I might not. I sound far less Scottish than I was, 25 years ago. But I still remember, Scotland was a great place to grow up, Chris. It's sadly a far worse place now in 2021 after years of oppression by the bloody nationalists, this nasty party that only focus on one thing rather than the economic success of the country and its people. It's a disaster. It's a disaster.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to be said. But Steve, what you're saying there now about, the cost now of just that announcement and the backlash, to all the business now, aviation business in the UK is terrible, isn't it?
I don't know where to start, Chris. It's kind of, I'm sort of stumped. As you know, we were having a chat on one of our common group chats that you and I are in yesterday with some of our friends in industry. And I have to say that the language that we were using was not appropriate for this podcast. But we were all agog and aghast at what has been people doing all the right things, the public following all the rules. Yes, you get the wankers out there, but they're everywhere, right? I mean, you can't stop them. The vaccination race, all of those frontliners, Chris, have contributed to unlocking some of these people say, "Oh, you shouldn't be going on holiday this year. You should be staying in England." And there's a lot of them around. Let me assure you. I mean, there's a lot on my social media. Says, "Oh, there's no need to go, Stephen. Why are you overseas?" I rarely post anything these days about being overseas because you get the nasty lot, the lefties sort of saying that you should just lock yourselves away and do nothing. That is not what was promised to us. People have had a very tough 15, 16 months. They wanted to get away. At the chance of getting away and at the prospect of going somewhere and then having booked somewhere and potentially spent a couple of grand for a family afford to go to Portugal for a week, they then have to come back and go to work. They can't isolate. So now that money is held with the airlines. The airlines were relying on that income to create it's like a virtuous circle, if you like, Chris.
Yeah, no, it's
so the public earn the money, they spend the money with the airline, they spend the money in the resorts, with the hotels, with the tour operators, with the travel providers, so on and so forth. All of that now, it's stuck. Why?
Yeah.
Because it can't be spent in resort or in the community that it was going to be spent in. It's now not going to be, it's now sitting in a bank account of an airline somewhere in an escrow or unflown revenue. They won't get that money for 30, 45, 60, 90 days, not because Air doesn't want to give it to them, but frankly, because of the process involved and the challenges associated with giving up refund. They'll be offered a voucher, no doubt. There's somebody that said, actually, well, when can I bloody travel? I don't want a bloody voucher. I want my money back.
Yeah.
And
No,
if I can't get my money back, I can't go to Cornwall, I can't go to... And actually, I don't like holidaying in the UK. Personally, I do. I know you do as well, Chris. I think that's one of the treats. When you live overseas and work overseas, the best thing
when you come back,
is holiday in this country. Anyway, look, we are where we are. I think all of the voices that are much more powerful than mine spoke yesterday. Willie spoke yesterday. Johan spoke yesterday. Sean spoke yesterday. Karen from the AOA spoke yesterday. They all spoke. So I didn't hear Molly, but I'm sure he did speak. Joseph spoke yesterday. They were all out there. So heralding the troops. But I think it falls on deaf ears, Chris.
It must do, Steve, because it's not just that, it's the inconsistency. So we were talking before about why was there mixing between green and red coming in? Why didn't Mr. Schnaps? Why didn't Mr. Shaps? Why didn't he sort things out?
Have you been on the Schnaps, Chris?
Yeah, we might as well be. But open T3 like they're doing now. But why is there so many logical, common sense decisions being delayed and then being turned out? And then the things that you would think would be eased in or eased out are done in a hurry. It's wrong.
Yeah,
it's so wrong, and that's what I don't understand, as well as the way, just the announcements here's one, right? Let me ask you, tell me this now. You can allow thousands into a sports event, but you can still only have 30 people or up to 50 people.
A wedding
outside.
or a funeral.
Yeah, how does that work out?
No idea.
I just find it utter nonsense.
Well, I'm just watching the racing in the background here. I'm a racing man. Not myself, but I like to watch the GGs and Epsom, and of course there's a crowd there. Royal Ascot is now going ahead with a much smaller. I think the numbers were they normally take 500,000 on a bad day at Royal Ascot.
Yeah.
They're allowing 4,000. I mean, it just sort of beggars belief, I mean, it's just sort of nonsense now that we've got this, this vital work that's been done by the NHS and Public Health England and the JCVI on the vaccination race. I mean, really, really fabulous stuff that is now not been able to be put to effective use because people are still not allowed to do what they wanted to do. It is bizarre, Chris. It is bizarre.
Yeah. But talking now, all right, so now on the flip side, with the anti-vaxxers and especially frontline NHS workers, now I've always said, right, they should have no choice. If they're on the front line, NHS, they've got to have a vaccine or else you can't come to work, in the story. And I don't understand why they can't make simple decisions like that when they're making some of these other decisions. Now, do you agree with that or not? Because I just think, no, if you're in front line and you're dealing directly,
it's a question of, you like sort of poking the bear on this, Chris, because you know that I'm a liberal conservative in these matters.
Yeah, exactly.
My response is the same as it was before. Although I use the evidence and the data available to influence my thinking, which I suspect is a good thing, although some people sort of get hung up on people making U-turns. My position at the beginning was I was never a fan of having to show passports to enter restaurants, bars, community halls, bowling clubs, cinemas, whatever. Right? That I thought that was totally wrong. That was Orwellian, if you like. I thought that was not Orwellian. Sorry, Orwellian. Yeah. Who's that? I don't know that. You made a new person up. So that I was never a fan of. On the flip side, it is the case today, Chris, that NHS professionals and medical professionals working in that setting are vaccinated against Hep A, Hep B, Hep C. Why? Because there is a risk of transmission from patient to caregiver or from patient to doctor. Seems logical to me. Tick. So for you to work here, you need to have that vaccine. So for me to travel or get on an airplane as a member of the public, get on an aircraft, a cruise ship, a tour bus, a train, the Orient Express, whatever I fancy doing on a whim, you might need a vaccination. Well, that's perfectly plausible because countries today stipulate for entry that you need vaccinations.
Yep, double vaccinations.
Right. So the bit in the middle is what you were prodding me about a few weeks ago, sort of poking the bear, saying, do you think it's reasonable that people working in some of these establishments are vaccinated? So do I think it's reasonable that people working in a bar or a restaurant have to be vaccinated? No, I do not. I think that's absolutely wrong, and that is a choice by the member of staff to be vaccinated or not. If, however, you put yourself into a setting of risk where the risk profile increases because of the type of work that you do, for example, a hospital, a morgue, a paramedic, or whatever, do I think it's reasonable then? Now, I don't know anything about this as a professional, right? I'm just saying my personal opinion is, yes, I think it's reasonable that the NHS should be able to say to you that to do this job or to continue to do this job by this date, you must be fully vaccinated. I think that is perfectly reasonable.
Yes, but you right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to be talking about the front door and not the back door. Okay, so I
always prefer the front door, Chris. Always prefer the front door. The back door has never been of a great appeal to me.
Right. I'm Agog and Aghast.
Well, wouldn't you prefer to walk in my front door with a beautiful concierge and the reception area and the flowers?
Steve, I'm 100% with you. I just feel there might be the odd one or two who are there with their mouths open, Agog and Aghast. However, we've clarified.
I don't bring my guests to the tradesman's entrance, Chris.
No. And let's move on rapidly from that. So now that we've established the front of that, what I meant by that was that you're suggesting that you're protected as an NHS front worker by having the vaccines against Hep B, etc. Right, which is fine. So that's why they should have it. But I'm talking about the fact that if you're in that front line, you could also be passing it on if you haven't been vaccinated. And that's what's wrong as well. So it has to go both ways. It's not just.
But you can transmit with the vaccine anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but they haven't categorically said to what degree and.
Oh, they have.
They said you can, yes, but it's less. It's a lot less likely whether it's.
Yes, but it's also 95% less likely to end up in hospital if you're fully vaccinated.
Yeah, which Steve is coming back to my point. If you're in frontline areas where you're either at risk yourself or you could potentially increase the risk to others, you should be made to have it. It shouldn't be a choice. The only choice you should have is if you don't have it, you don't work in that area. You go and work somewhere else.
Well, I think it's a bit rich to suggest that somebody in clerical department in the 7th floor of St Thomas's Hospital has to be vaccinated to work there. Why would that be?
Chris,
in the same way. I
use the word risk.
But Chris, we manage risk every day in our business.
I know.
That's what we do best. So governments are not used to managing risk. They try and close the door completely and not let anybody in.
Yes.
So look, if you are out on the ramp, the reason that we don't ask customers to wear steel toe cap boots or protective footwear is because they are supervised, that they're walking on markings, that they're walking to specific areas of lower risk.
Correct.
The reason that I, as an auditor or as an inspector or as somebody doing an audit, has to is because I'm looking around the full set of the aircraft. I'm not partaking in that task. I'm not in the operating table thing. Same way I'm not loading the bags in the hole. I'm not planning on picking up a bag, but the risk profile has increased. So if I'm only going in and out of clerical areas in my building, isn't it the same as, should we ask Pastor to put your defenders on and hard hats? And
no, Steve, but I'm actually agreeing with you on that one because
it didn't sound like it.
No. Well, hold on a second now. Remember, Statler and Waldorf are a double team. Now, what I'm saying is you've established that there's a lesser risk and there's a manageable risk of somebody going into the clerical office on the 7th floor, provided they hygiene, wear their mask, and they don't come across
versus those working in ICU. Yeah, sounds reasonable.
And I'm fair on that. What I'm talking about It's people on the front line. So people who are interacting with everybody that comes in. And it's not just necessarily in a
Who's
hospital.
on the front line?
And it's not just necessarily a hospital. I'm talking about people that are interacting with the public, and they're at risk themselves, or they could be putting the public at a greater risk. If that risk assessment is assessed for those particular jobs, Steve, I would personally find nothing wrong with somebody saying to me, Chris, you want to do that job? We think there's a bit of a risk for you,
Chris,
there's a bit of risk for others, and you need to be vaccinated.
So we know that 30% of the population of the UK work in hospitality, right?
Yep.
Are you suggesting that 30% of the hospital must be vaccinated? If they don't have a job?
It depends. It depends on what the interaction is, Steve.
So the guy working in the kitchen, the chef making the meals, transmitting disease into the meals, is that required?
I would have to have a risk assessment for all of those particular areas. I'll tell you what I would do, right? Mr. Shaps has made such a, I'm not going to even say the word that you used earlier, right? Couldn't be worse. I would be saying to people, look, for Christ's sake, it's proven now, vaccines are important. Get yourself vaccinated. Otherwise you don't have that job there. That's it. I would say that. Steve.
Okay.
And if it was my business, I would say 100%.
So Chris, everybody that works with me or my friends, my family, I say, get the bloody vaccine, get vaccinated, get vaccinated.
Yep.
Why? Because I think it's really important that as society, we take responsibility for our own actions. To coin a phrase from Lord Lloyd Webber last week, the famous theatre impresario,
yes.
He said...
Who's threatening to take legal action.
He said this, and it stuck with me, it resonated with me. Lord Lloyd Webber said last week, in an interview, choosing not to be vaccinated against COVID is akin to drink driving.
Yeah.
You know that what you are doing may or will or could harm others.
Yep.
In the same way that getting behind your wheel of the car when you piss as a fart or you're off your face after 10 pints at the pub, you know that's dangerous. And you might kill a kid. You might kill somebody on the road, or you might seriously injure them. Regardless, you're putting others at risk. It's the same thing. I agree with you completely, and I agree with him. What I'm saying is, do we want to become the society or the era or the generation that stipulates that you must have a vaccine potentially to have a job in this setting? I don't know that we do. I don't know that I'd support that. Would I do everything I possibly could as the leader or the manager or the executive responsible for frontline staff? Of course I would, Chris. But would I refuse that person a job if they chose not to? No, I would not.
I would find a job for them, Steve, but it might not be the one that they would prefer to do. But I'm still sticking with it. And I just think there's so much wishy-washy politics going around
but aren't you
I would have, it's just now it's getting into my opinion. So now Statler and Waldorf have been thrown off the balcony. They're now in the front of the studio. They're gone. This is my opinion. I would make them do it. All right, because I think it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary to dig your heels in for something that is scientifically proven and it's data proven that it makes a difference. So for goodness sake, why not go and do it?
But isn't that playing to the nervous Nancy's out there?
Isn't it? What, sorry?
Playing to the nervous Nancy's.
No, mate. No, it's not. No, it's playing to the direct Derricks, the ones who have got a clarity that's saying, right, we need to do this because it makes sense. Now everybody do it. End of story. And I think there's too many ifs and ands and buts and pots and pans and my aunt's my uncle could be my aunt. I forget all that. I just think that's it. They should be done.
Well, I will encourage and support and coerce or do whatever, but I would not make it a condition of employment in those settings. Personally, that's my view.
Yeah, and how wonderful we're in such a wonderful country and a wonderful society where you and me can have such a difference of opinion on something as simple as that.
And still be mates.
and still share a drink afterwards.
I just wonder, Chris, if you would then take that to the flu jab, for example, or to chicken pox, or to measles, mumps and rubella.
I would, Steve, to be honest with you, mate, if something was proven that it was costing unnecessary funds and it was causing problems for a majority of people, I would start to err on the side that, look, if it makes sense and it passes this, then yeah, you got to have it done. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the amount of money, the amount I've actually today I've just been to a local hospital, and the staff are incredible. What they do, the way they're managing it, the volunteers at the front desks, everything. And I just think for all that effort and hard work, for people to refuse to do something that makes sense for whatever reason, and most of the reasons I've heard will not convince me on the best of brightest of sunshine.
No. I think, look, if you look at the types of people that are refusing, Chris, so if you look at the penetration of the vaccine success, so the above 40s are particularly well catered for.
Yeah.
Numbers well above the 70s and the 40s, well above the 75s and the 50s, well above the 80s above that. And as I said, a 100% success rate in the 75 to 80 age group. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. So, a large proportion of people have accepted. This is not a country with vaccine hesitancy at a level of the likes of some Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, or indeed our nearest and dearest neighbor and the old alliance with our French friends. They only have 30% vaccine rates under normal good times, Chris. So we can do all the right things we wish in this country, in this little island in which we live on, God's country. But I'm not sure that having these, this is not something to be offensive, but having these slightly sort of punitive or punitive measures for those that don't accept, or draconian views about somebody's choices, that we will do the right thing or just service by our people when there are others that are not necessarily able to contribute in the same methods.
I'm agreeing with that. All right. The whole world is a club. Okay. Different franchises, different locations, but it's all one club. And until the club is safe, nobody's fully safe. But what I'm saying is, me and Sana, we had a podcast with an incredible young lady and her mother. Okay. And they run Every Infant Matters. Amazing what they've done. They even their own grandfather it was too late for him. He was lucky enough to be in an ICU bed. They gave the bed up for a 26-year-old naval officer, okay, because that person needed the ventilator. The granddad, unfortunately, I think he was 92 or 94, and he was too far gone. And the lady I'm talking about, her and her mum, the family had to make a decision, and they did it, and they did it for incredible reasons. But whilst they were both suffering from COVID, they created a COVID task force. They're both medical doctors. They're incredible what they've been doing. All right, they have put so much work and effort into it. Now, even though they couldn't or they didn't openly say, the reasons as to why, a lot of it, Steve, and a lot of these countries. So now with this G7 and people are talking about foreign aid and you should do this and you should do that. There's a lot of things that have to be done on your home territory first, and especially with the loss of funds that have happened over the last 15, 18 months. So should you or should you not go below that percentile for foreign aid and what you should do? Personally, if you're giving foreign aid, there should be certain terms and conditions that go with it. And countries should be made, Steve, to prove that they're doing those right things to keep receiving that foreign aid. And,
absolutely.
And that should be, humans should be caring about other humans, but not when there are so many things going on in some of those countries that beg a belief, Steve. Open political rallies, sporting rallies, religious rallies, all these things. And then when you look at the basics of some of the hospitals, yet some of these countries are getting heavily involved with arms and with military issues and space programs. It's wrong. You start looking at.
I find it amazing that
have the right. Every human being should have the right to have a roof over their head, food, to be safe, to be educated, and to have access to health programs when they need it, and not because of money or favor or wherever you are that you're excluded. That's where it's wrong.
Well, I see, there's been some movement and progress with the new US administration just yesterday, with Biden announcing he will donate 75 million vaccines to the developing world, the third world. Just to be clear, 75 million, that's a drop in the ocean. I mean, that's nothing.
Steve, there's been between 1.2 and 1.5 billion doses already given, and there is currently a surplus of 1.5 billion, So yes, that is a drop in the ocean. They should be doing a lot more.
Of course they should. But of course, under the previous administration, they weren't sort of looking after their neighbourly demands and obligations. I do think, and I'm slightly biased, but facts speak louder than my rhetoric, maybe, or my narrative, or my words. But the UK has historically been a very good neighbour, Chris, a very good neighbourly force for good.
Absolutely brilliant.
And it has contributed, one of only 2 countries in the world to contribute 0.7% of GDP to foreign aid, and that is an outstanding amount. It is the largest single donor to the COVAX program. Our little small island, our tiny little island, is the largest single donor to the COVAX program. Biden has now, sort of reset America's measure in terms of its contribution. But there are these nations with wonderful economies, like China, like Japan, like Korea, like Taiwan, Australia. Australia being one of the worst, by the way, in international relations and bilateral relations. Country that I'm very close to, as you all know, and lived for a long time, and I love Australia. But they don't. Germany, another bugger when it comes to defence forces, and Chris, I might be speaking with my opinion here, but the facts speak for themselves. So if you want to fact check me, I'm agreeing with you. Please fact check me on this stuff.
It's just that one word that made me smile, Steve. I'm allowed to smile.
But the Germans are buggers. They are buggers.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they're so parochial. They're such a successful nation of scientists and engineers and wonderful economic generation and great industrial strategy and automotive. Germany does so many things right. I lived in Berlin, Chris. I know you're very fond of Germany as well, having worked for a German company for years. A big fan. However, they speak a lot, but they don't deliver. And what's needed now in this crisis is actually delivery, putting your money where your mouth is. You can say all the things, you can pretend you deliver X vaccines. You can make a pledge to the COVAX fund. They can pledge money. Pledging is what I used to do to Childline 10 years ago, when I first got a paycheck. Well, more than 20 years ago, sorry. But used to pledge money rather than donate it. Why? Because you had to wait for your paycheck to come in to be able to feed the money over there. So I'd pledge 100 quid and you'd pay 10 quid over 10 months. And, that's what these countries are doing, Chris. Some of the worst success. So I do think that we've got to be more neighbourly. And I think, I was on a call last night with the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. I tell you that if you want to talk about harrowing, I know what India's going through is harrowing and the COVID crisis harrowing, but you want to talk about oppression and you want to talk about, sort of anti-colonial need to sort of rise from the shackles. That was an amazing call that I was on. It was emotional. But listening to these people, this one lady in Haifa, another in Jaffa, another in Jerusalem, or Quds, Al-Quds, as we call in Arabic, was really, the traumas that they're going through without COVID. So we've all got to be neighbourly in the right reasons, for the right reasons. Anyway, we slightly digressed from our podcast started as an aviation podcast, and now we're on to geopolitical sort of movements.
But, I know. We've got to get ourselves back to where we need to be next week. But it's Steve. It's just so frustrating seeing things that don't make sense, and then seeing other areas. You think, well, where? No matter how sensible, how serious, or how much alcohol you've had, can that make sense? The things that are happening now, they're just not making sense. And that's what's disappointing people, confusing people, and making people think, well, why should I do what I know is right when nobody else, so many other people aren't doing it.
Well, as somebody said on a he shall remain nameless, but on the same group that we're on together yesterday, Chris. I'll use different language to protect our listeners, but we've been compliant as a society, generally.
Yeah.
The public have conformed. They've done the right thing. They've listened to government advice. They've got vaccinated. You've given us these hope of dates and things in the calendar, which we could look forward to.
Yeah.
After 15 months of hell. And now you've changed the rules and you pulled the carpet from beneath our feet. You've pulled the kind of the carrot away that you were dangling. And now the stick is back again. Mess with us and we'll mess with you. Those are different words than the ones that were shared with you and I last night. But the public now and professionals in our industry are so aggrieved
Yes, yes,
with
yes,
the government,
exactly.
and so aggrieved
Yeah.
with a change of direction, that if you now start to pull this away from us, we will mess with you, and you will find that conformance. I'm not making a threat. I'm just saying conformance will drop back again, and you will lose the goodwill of the people that you've had for such a long time. And this country relies on it. Living in Spain and working in Spain, as you and I have done, Chris, we know that you don't mess with the Guardia Civil.
Oh,
you know.
no.
You know that you don't mess with the Corps Policía Nacional. The Policía Local, you can have a bit of a banter with, but the other two,
Yeah.
this lot here in the UK, they take our police for granted. They will cajole and provoke a response from them. But the European police forces don't tolerate misbehavior. So you might be lucky sitting in these beautiful aisles and be able to provoke and non-conform and not wear masks or do what you like and get away with it. But let me assure you, when you go into the continent, that will not happen. You will not have that privilege. So we better get out of this ASAP by conformance and vaccines and getting back to something and getting our industry that we're here to talk about, Chris.
Yes,
getting
exactly.
our industry back on the footing that we need it to be back on again.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing. It's just now, that one like briefing has just put it back so far again and disappointed so many. It's such a shame. Such a shame. You finished your drink?
Finished my hibiki, Chris.
Yes. Well done. I'm not sure whether you should be Statler and me Waldorf, whichever way. But listen, as always, thank you. Next week we'll have to get back on track, and we'll have to.
Next week we will be together.
We will, and let's hope to God there's some good news and better news, because
next week we'll be together. We'll have to get Salam. His challenge is to work out how to the camera work with us both in the same place.
Yeah, we'll just sit opposite ends of the ballroom.
Very good.
Right.
A location to be confirmed.
Exactly, and I look forward to the dancing training and the exercises. So I'll see you next week.
Cheers, Chris.
All
Have
the
a good
best.
one.
Take care. Thanks, Salam.
Have a good weekend.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot.
You too. Bye.